Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Saved by the 90s. My name's Adam Patterson. With me today is a guy whose offer you can never refuse, Mr. Ken Bakley. Hey, Ken.
Hello.
There were plenty of gangster movies released throughout the 90s, many of which would go on to become classics within the genre. And September of 1990 saw a whopping 4 titles released within the month. We'll also be taking a look at a semi-popular mob-themed TV series which ended its run in 1990. So get ready to sleep with the fishes because this is Saved by the 90s.
We are on the threshold of a new decade. The future holds unlimited possibilities.
Challenge.
Some which could plunge us into the depths.
Preserve our fragile planet.
Others which could raise us to new heights.
Grow old along with me.
Opportunities to help people enjoy a more active, healthier retirement.
The best is yet to be.
To stretch our children's minds.
Open your computers, please.
To develop advanced technology and strengthen our competitive position in the world.
I'm going to stop the commercial right there. I just want to I just love the whispering in the background of that commercial.
I love the whispering. Although I will note one of the whispers was about protecting the climate. And you know what makes me upset? Like old ads and PSAs from decades ago about how we need to do something to save the environment because in decades the problem's going to get worse, and then we just didn't do anything at all.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that because one of the commercials that I was going to pick was exactly that. It was some guy talking about the greenhouse effect, and I was like, oh man, this would be perfect. But
we have done like a grand total of like 4 things for the environment since 1970, and every time we keep saying it, like they keep saying in all of them, you got to do something now, and we just never did. And it's like, well,
now
we had a good run, I guess.
Yeah, now we're effed.
We didn't have a good run.
We
just didn't do anything.
We had a terrible run.
Folks, welcome to Saved by the 90s. We're all gonna die.
That was from Merrill Lynch, by the way, if you were wondering what that commercial was.
I love that because it's not an ad about anything.
No.
Like I kept thinking, like, what is this ad about? Because who will save us? The financial industry.
Of course. They're the ones with the power. They can do it.
Of course.
They can do it.
And they're always acting in the best interest of the people.
Oh my God.
Our first film this month was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and is widely regarded as one of the best mob films ever made. Directed by Martin Scorsese and released on September 1st, this is Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, the most acclaimed movie of the year. Scorsese at his most powerful, the best mob movie ever. Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, and Academy Award winner Joe Pesci. Goodfellas, look for it at your video store.
Goodfellas tells the true story of Henry Hill, a half-Irish, half-Sicilian Brooklyn kid who was adopted by neighborhood gangsters at an early age and climbs the ranks of a mafia family under the guidance of Jimmy Conway. Ken, what did you think of Goodfellas?
I know it will happen on this podcast, and it has to happen if we're going to be encompassing, but I always dread whenever we talk about a movie that's already extremely famous because I have no idea what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah, it was kind of weird even just saying, like, what did you think of Goodfellas?
Yeah.
Like,
have you heard of this little movie?
I don't know. Maybe we've done our share of popular movies, like big movies on this show, but we usually try to pick smaller ones. And
I'm pretty certain that the longest review segment we've ever had on the show was for The Rage Carrie 2. And most of that was just me yammering on for about 45 minutes.
It was funny because, like, I remember, like, the Christmas episode when we did all made-for-TV movies, and, like, people probably never heard of... I mean, I know I never heard of, like, all of those movies, and yet we had a lot to say about every single one of them.
And I guess we have to talk about Goodfellas, but I could wrap this segment up right now. It's good.
Sure. I love Goodfellas. I think it's... Yeah, it's probably my favorite gangster movie.
I think it's up there for me.
I like mob movies in general, and I think Yeah, I mean, this Casino is up there too. I mean, Casino feels very similar in a lot of ways, and this is the type of movie that, like, they teach in film school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like every shot is like iconic,
Mm-hmm.
or many of the shots are iconic. Of course, you have the steady cam shot going through the restaurant, that single take, that beautiful single take shot going through the restaurant. Probably one of my favorite shots in a movie ever. One thing that I don't know if I ever mentioned in talking about this movie is how good the casting was. The kid that they got to play young Ray Liotta as Henry Hill, like, that kid looked exactly like him. It's like uncanny how similar those two looked.
Mm-hmm. That's such an important thing in a movie. Like, it's not an actual important thing, but when you see it happen, it feels like the most important thing in the world is when you can find a child actor that looks like their adult counterpart.
Yeah, I mean, if you see some movies, some movies actually feel the need to give you context clues when they make that switch as to who the person is now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it Chapter 2 probably did that. I can't remember specifically, even though I thought that the adult versions of those kids were pretty solid choices. Yeah. I feel like if you cast the right kid, you don't have to do those context clues, and the audience will just automatically know, like, that's the person. And that's what they did in this movie. There weren't any, like, expository dumps that, like, tell you, oh, now he's older. This is Henry Hill. Remember that kid that you saw before? And now he's an adult and he's being played by Ray Liotta.
It was the craziest thing in movies just ever on that subject was kind of the inverted version of it. In Boyhood, Linklater had no idea of knowing how much grown-up Eller Coltrane looked like he could be Ethan Hawke's son.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. That's what I always think about there, because it's not exactly like, child actor casting like we think of it, but that felt like such a weird sibling of that idea that seems to work so well.
I think everything about Goodfellas I think it's a near perfect movie. It's a movie that I've seen many times over and can still sit down and watch at any given time, even though, it's a lengthy movie. It's pushing 2.5 hours. It never feels like it to me. It's just such a full, cohesive story, and it's just a masterclass of filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm not quite as sold on I'm not quite as sold on it as being like a near top tier movie for me. I rewatched it. I'd seen it before, but I'd seen it for the first time relatively recently, maybe a year or two ago, and the first time I saw it, I was, completely loved it. And then so I rewatched it for this podcast, and it's always like a thing where I feel like first rewatches of a movie can sometimes sour me a bit on it. So I was just kind of like uniformly impressed the second time. I feel like I might bounce back if I watch it a third time someday. I can't exactly put my finger on anything that I would change about it. It was just like peak Scorsese when Scorsese is like top Scorseseing everywhere. I can take or leave once it enters well past the second hour of it, I guess. So maybe it's just a personal preference. Like, that's why we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. That's why I'm a little nervous about The Irishman, because that's 3.5 hours of it.
I'm a little nervous about that too, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know. I don't know about The Irishman. I mean, I probably shouldn't be worried, because there hasn't been a movie of his that I've actively disliked.
Yeah, no.
But
me neither.
if you should be confident about any director, I think Scorsese would be the one to be confident about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know about The Irishman. I mean, I'm anxious to see it for sure. I just 3.5 hours though. I don't know. It's gonna be on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
They're doing a limited. Is it a limited?
That's so
theatrical?
important to me to learn that it's gonna be on Netflix.
I know. Yeah, like I might be seeing it at the New York Film Festival next week, I want to say, but I just, man, that's quite a commitment to sit there for that long. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be good, but will it be as good as Goodfellas? I highly doubt that.
I truly cannot wait to be amused and infuriated, once Oscar season gets into full swing and you have like all those infuriating blind ballots from like the Academy members that don't watch any of the movies, and I know they're all going to say, I watched the first 45 minutes of The Irishman, but then I saw how much there was left and I just fell asleep.
I'm sure that's going to happen.
They're all going to say it. You ever read the Oscars blind ballots?
I have, yeah. They're infuriating.
They are my favorite and least favorite part of award season at once.
So you have this cast that I mean, this is like this is like the peak of these people's career for the most part. I mean, this is when this whole ensemble is just firing on all cylinders. You have Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, Paul Sorvino, just big characters in here.
You could basically give this movie as a solid answer to the question for almost any of those actors, what was their best performance? And you could give this movie.
Yeah. I mean, they all just crushed it. Joe Pesci won an Oscar for this, which is funny because I think this is the only Oscar that it won. It was nominated.
I think you might be right, yeah.
It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Writing, which is a adapted screenplay, and then Best Editing, but it didn't win any of those. So
one thing that stood out to me when I first watched the movie is the absolute sheer amount of like how important it is that they spend as much time as they do in this movie talking about the preparation of food. And that was going to be an angle that I used whenever I talked about the movie, except I realized that was an angle everybody had when talking about this movie, because when I went back and watched, as I tend to do, the Billy Crystal Oscars monologue from that year, that's one of his jokes about Goodfellas. So by the time it got to a joke that you could use in the Oscars monologue, I think it was a pretty well-established note about this movie in particular.
Yeah, I mean, the food was very, very prominent in this. One of the things that I took note of this time around watching it, and it was something that I've thought about before, because often on the weekly show and even on this show before, we've talked about narration in movies, and I'm not particularly a fan of any narration, any voiceover in movies at all. And this movie is just loaded with narration, but it works.
It really does.
Somehow works so well in this because, it's adapted from Henry Hill's memoir, and this whole movie feels like a memoir, and it's the way that it's structured. It just works so well. And I have to think that movies that came after this that had narration were drawing inspiration from this movie, and it
definitely.
and it never worked quite the same.
Yeah, in terms of narration usually being a net negative for a movie, this is the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, and another thing that usually frustrates me is when the perspective of the narrator will, like, when they'll swap narrators, and they do that in this, and that worked for me too. And I'm just like, I'm not sure why I really loved it in this movie, and I pretty much hate it in every other movie. It's just so well done. And just every little detail in this, like the freeze frames, there's a scene where there's a fourth wall break, and there's all these like little nuanced things that Scorsese injects into this movie that elevate it so far above like your standard biopic that it's just a classic.
Oh yeah.
And of course I had to look up where everybody is, the real life characters and stuff. A lot of these guys are now deceased, but I read that the big heist that they talk about in the movie, the Lufthansa heist, they just arrested a lot of the conspirators or the people involved with that in 2015. And they were like all in their like 70s.
That's incredible.
Any final thoughts on Goodfellas before we move on?
I feel like the most famous movies on this podcast over time will be the ones that I have the least to say about.
Typically, the more I like a movie, the less I have to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that ratio a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means about me as a person.
The way I think about it is when I'm writing a review, at least, if I like a movie, I can write a lot about it, but I can't say a lot about it. Like if I had to be prompted on it.
Mhm.
Because usually what makes a movie really good, you can get into the details when you're writing. You can sort of draw ideas and see connections when you're writing it out. But when you're talking about it, you're like, hey, that was really good.
Right. Yeah. It's always hard. I mean, we do it like every week. We review a movie on the weekly podcast, and we choose the movie before we see it. And like this week, the movie we picked, both Kevin and I just had so little to say about it. And it was like, it's because the movie was fine. Like it wasn't amazing. It wasn't terrible. It was right down the middle. And I think that those are the hardest, the ones that are just completely, straight down the middle. And yeah, you're right. It is easier to write your thoughts about a movie than it is to just discuss them.
I think another factor to it might be if like everybody in a conversation feels generally the same way about a movie, whereas if one person really likes a movie more than other people, then they can spend it trying to like express their thoughts, as evident by our review of The Rage Carry 2, which was basically just my monologue. I'd like to apologize for that review. Not a thing I said in it, just how long it was.
It was a good conversation.
Although I do not retract a single point I made during it.
No, you shouldn't.
If anything, I'd like to go harder and defend that movie now. It's actually a masterpiece.
I'd like to double down on my
I'd like to
Carry 2.
quadruple down on my The Rage Carry 2 defense. For a future episode.
Oh my.
I'd like to start a podcast about the broader Carrie universe. We will talk about all of the Carries except the De Palma one, because everybody likes the De Palma one. We will talk about the Rage Carry 2 on this podcast. You don't have to be on it if you don't want to, but maybe it'll just be me talking. We'll talk about the Rage Carry 2. We'll talk about the Carrie the musical. We'll try to find something to say about the 2013 remake. We'll find all sorts of things to say.
The Carrie cast. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to being a movie I never heard of, our next title features Gene Hackman as a DA attempting to keep his client safe as she prepares to testify against the mob. Directed by Peter Hyams and released on September 21st, this is Narrow Margin.
I saw a man get murdered.
You get on the train, lock the door. This year, the name for suspense
They got automatic weapons. If they see you, they're gonna kill you.
is Narrow Margin.
The people I work for want the woman.
What woman?
This is my life we're giving with.
Gene Hackman,
We can't get off the train.
Ann Archer,
I don't want to die.
Narrow Margin.
Starts Friday, September 21st at a theater near you.
An LA district attorney is attempting to take an unwilling murder witness back to the US from Canada in order to testify against the top-level mob boss. Frantically trying to escape two deadly hitmen sent to silence her, they board a Vancouver-bound train only to discover that the killers are on board as well. For the next 20 hours, as the train hurtles through the Canadian wilderness, a deadly game of cat and mouse ensues. Adam, do you want to start us off on this discussion of this objective masterpiece, Narrow Margin?
Yeah, so the funny thing, the thing about Narrow Margin, they said it in the trailer. If you look at the theatrical posters and stuff, they really push the suspense. They're like, this movie is so full of suspense, you're gonna pee your pants. And so it is so intense. But then when you watch it, you're just like, what? Where's the suspense? What?
3 suspenseful things happen in this movie.
What's happening in this movie? This movie.
Will they get on the train in time?
This movie like it says in the synopsis, the whole thing takes place on a train. So it mostly, like 90% of it, just consists of Gene Hackman walking from car to car, just poking around, and the thing I love is just how comfortable he is on this train, and how much he just treats this train as if it's his home. Like, he's sitting in other people's beds. He's just like going into random rooms and talking to other passengers, like private cars. Just early on in the movie, there's this scene. I don't know why this exists. He goes into one of the cars, and he has this conversation with a mom and her son. And this scene, I don't know how long it was. I didn't time it. It felt like it was 15 minutes long. She's telling him to leave, and he's just like coming up with excuses not to leave, but none of it made any sense at all. And at one point, the woman's just like, just leave. You have to leave. She's like, she goes, "This is my son, not your wife." and he's just like, "Okay, I'll go talk to the conductor." I'm just like, what is happening here?
I love how obviously there have been many great movies and stories and, just fiction in general that's set on a train. It is a good place to set a work. However, if you didn't know about any of them and this movie was the only thing you saw, you'd think it was the worst idea ever.
It is, it's baffling the decisions that were made with this movie. I couldn't even believe what I was watching. Like, so many strange conversations and just decisions that were, and I think that a lot of it was supposed to be building this suspense that they're going for, but it all came off as just being so strange. Like,
I will say, when the movie is not having 15-minute conversations that go absolutely no direction at all, except when they're going in insane directions, I was never like to the point where I thought this is completely beyond redemption, because there is like a baseline level of professionalism to the actual like feel of the movie. Sometimes like a basic level of professionalism so monotonous that it feels like a really well-made TV movie after a while.
Yeah. I could see that as if this was a TV movie, I could totally see that, but it's not a TV
it's
movie.
Either because it would either be a great 90s TV movie or but it's not, so it's just a really mediocre theatrical film.
Yeah. So you have Ann Archer as she's the female lead. She goes on this blind date with this guy, and they're at this like really fancy restaurant. They're talking this restaurant up. They're just talking about this restaurant nonstop. They're like, "Oh, the food here is just going to be so great. You're going to love this food. It's going to be incredible." And then the guy gets a note that's sealed, by the way. The note was sealed, which I thought was kind of odd, where they would hand him a sealed note, and he opens it up and he's like, "Oh, I have to take a phone call. I'll be right back." And she's like, "Oh, well, I'll just come with you." And then they just leave the restaurant. Like, they don't eat. They just leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets killed because it turns out that he's like a lawyer for the mob and he was stealing money from them, and she witnesses it and blah, blah, blah.
I'd like to imagine that after they killed him, there was a second team sent to kill him, but it was from the restaurant for taking up a reservation and then not ordering anything. And then I thought, oh, he's already dead.
So then you have Gene Hackman as this like a superstar assistant DA, like or deputy district attorney. And I mean, he's doing some pretty wild stuff here as a DA. You don't normally see DAs going through this level of action. And so they somehow figure out where she goes into hiding, and they figure out where she is. She's in this like cabin out in the woods, and I guess it's her friend that tells them. Somehow the bad guys follow a police officer and Gene Hackman. They follow them with a helicopter and then just riddle this cabin with bullets. the cop gets killed. Gene Hackman and Ann Archer, they escape and they get on this train. And that's where pretty much the rest of the whole movie takes place.
I
And
didn't realize at first that most of this movie takes place on a train.
nor did I. Yeah, I
No.
didn't think it was going to.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be maybe like sort of a long sequence of events. Like I thought maybe it was going to turn to like a courtroom movie where it ends with the trial or something. Well, it kind of does, but with mostly the trial. And then about at the 30 minutes into this still being on the train, I thought the rest of this movie takes place entirely on this train.
Yeah, I thought just from like the little trailer that I watched and stuff that I thought that it was just going to be a big set piece on the train. Like that was going to be one, really pivotal moment on the train, not the whole thing. But yeah, sure enough, this whole thing takes place on the train.
It's like a weird bit of geographical dissonance because in the first 20 minutes of the movie, you have established 2 countries that it's taking place in, wide ranges of space covered in between. And then it's like, and actually the rest of this movie, besides the last 8 minutes, will take place on this train.
And just to underscore what you said, Ken, I like single location movies. I like movies.
Oh yeah, I love them too.
I think a train is a great location for a movie. Lots of different cars and whatever. But man, they just don't really utilize this. Like I said before, it mostly consists of Gene Hackman just walking around this train. And then so at one point he thinks he's being followed. So he ducks into like a bed, like a sleeper thing. And there's like a woman sleeping in there and he covers her mouth and he's just like, I'm not going to hurt you and stuff. And then he just leaves. And she, I guess, was just okay with that interaction happening.
I guess.
Because you'd think that if something like that were to happen, she would immediately be getting the conductor or someone on staff to be like, look, a strange man just got into bed with me and covered my mouth and then left. Like, I don't know. That doesn't track.
No, it doesn't. A lot of things that happen in this movie don't track, but the train, of course, stays on the tracks the entire time.
Yes. And Ann Archer stays in the same car the entire time. Where Gene Hackman, he's going to the dining car, he's getting food, he's meeting women, he's having drinks, chugging coffee like it's nobody's business, all the while just leaving her in the one car to hide.
I love movies where everyone's always drinking coffee.
Oh yeah,
because it's just needless business. Like that was the thing I got whenever I watch All the President's Men, is the amount of like people like when they're going around, they're just offering them coffee at like 10:30 at night. Like they'll knock on someone's door and it's like clearly well into the evening, and they'll be like, "Hey, I just put on a pot of coffee. Do you want some?"
Yeah, he's always ordering coffee in this movie. I know that's one thing I noticed. And Ann Archer has nothing to work with here. She's relegated to basically a damsel in distress. She's got nothing. Gene Hackman, I think, is good in this. I loved his line delivery because he never every bit of dialogue he said, he never sounded like he was serious. It sounded like he was joking. Like with
every line delivery is a surprise.
Everything he said was just a joke. Like he wasn't taking anything seriously at all, which I kind of liked. The action, although I would say that sometimes the action is also baffling, especially when he tells her to get out of the train, like to just climb out on the outside of the moving train. I thought the action was pretty well done for the most part. It was uninspired, but I thought that it was well executed.
I did truly love the bit where they're fighting with one of the villains over the like glass observation deck.
Yeah.
Everyone just is just completely horrified by like the lovely Canadian wilderness suddenly interrupted by people just violently fighting each other right above them.
And of course you have Gene Hackman tossing people off this train like it's nobody's business. You have several scenes of people getting tossed from the train to their violent conclusion.
If you want a movie where Gene Hackman drinks coffee in between throwing people off a moving train, then this is basically your personal Goodfellas.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I will say that there were a couple scenes that I thought were really well shot too. There's one scene in particular that I'm thinking of where it's Gene Hackman and Ann Archer, and they're just having this conversation. It's near the I don't know if it's I don't know how far into it. It's pretty far into it at this point. And they're like going through some tunnels or something, and they're having this conversation, and everything just goes black periodically as they're going through these like tunnels. And I thought that that looked really good. And I thought that that was really well done.
Oh yeah, there are well done scenes in this movie. It is not a complete. It's not like just continually baffling. There are legitimately good decisions and choices made here. It just mixes in with everything else to create a movie that is, you know, on the balance okay, but never like boring, but never like a truly forgettable okay, because there'll be good scenes mixed with whatever is between them.
Yeah, I agree. I never felt bored by what I was watching. I didn't think it was particularly good,
Like
but
that is where the TV movie comparison comes in, because TV movies are usually bonkers.
I just loved the one-off conversations he would have with people, because like for instance, the first time he met the heavyset guy, and
Yes.
I'm just like, what? Like, is that guy? Is he someone? Are we supposed to think he's a bad guy, or
Nope.
or what? And
Nope.
And then the kid, the whole thing he does with the kid, where the kid has the fake gun and he takes it and does all this stuff. And I guess that scene at the beginning when he meets the mom and the kid, like that was set up for this kid to be involved, but
there are
totally
so many
unnecessary.
like the other character you mentioned, where there was no payoff, and I wondered why it was in the movie. Because they're like characters where I'm like, is this a cameo appearance? It's like I don't know, someone involved with the film production making a cameo, and it's just an inside joke, because there's no reason for this scene to be here.
Yeah, and there's also this sort of weird like love interest story that happens where he's, you know, doing his thing where he's wandering around on the train, and he meets this woman, and they start chatting and having drinks and stuff, and then he meets her again later on, and it turns out she's one of the bad guys, but it's like, why like, I mean, was I supposed to be shocked when she showed up on top of the train pointing a gun at them? Like, because I wasn't shocked. I actually didn't care at all.
Yeah, I was only ever shocked when they would introduce someone who actually turned out to be relevant to the plot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange. Just really strange movie, this one. I'm surprised I literally never heard of this movie before.
No, me neither.
I didn't even know of its existence. And then
it is apparently a very, very loose remake of a movie that Peter Hyams said that he saw on TV once very late at night, which was also how they wrote the movie Airplane. They saw 0 Hour on TV late at night while looking for commercials to make parodies of, and they saw 0 Hour, and that's how Airplane was born.
One thing that this movie reminded me of is that I know Gene Hackman's retired, but man, I wish we had more Gene Hackman in our lives.
Oh yeah.
He hasn't made a movie since 2004 with Welcome to Mooseport. And then that got me down when I looked that up last night, and that got me down a rabbit hole of actors who are now retired. And it got me thinking about like James Caan and Jack Nicholson. And it's funny how actors just kind of fade away, and you forget that, oh yeah, Gene Hackman's hasn't been in a movie in over a decade.
We're so used to thinking that actors who aren't in movies anymore, like they're just like there's some sort of thing beyond their control that they must want to be in movies. But Gene Hackman, you know, he's just he's retired. He doesn't want to do movies anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You get they're just old, and they want to spend time with their family, and it's perfectly understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
like Rick Moranis, good example. Wanted to spend time with his family, so he retired.
Like, of course, I understand it for adult actors. I'm also very, very happy for for any child actor that does like a couple of big projects and then leaves the industry to have a normal human life.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
That is always a choice I can deeply, deeply respect.
I think a lot of child actors are wary of doing that, especially if they love acting. I think that they're nervous that if they leave and like go to school or whatever, or leave and just try to figure themselves out, that they will no longer be relevant when they try to come back into the industry. And I think that that's while it may be true, I don't know, but I think that that's probably why a lot of these child actors end up getting messed up.
Well, I mean, I can understand that, but also it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Of course, I think Anna Klumsky was a child actor and then retired at went to school a bit and went to college, and then eventually she came back and she just as a general note, we're recording this on the night of the Emmys. She might win an Emmy in a couple hours. I am sorry. I feel like I've led us down about 3,000 sidetracks on this episode so far.
That's just what this show is.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. It's all part of the larger conversation.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on Narrow Margin? It's got a really forgettable generic name, too.
I kept why is it called Narrow Margin?
I don't know. I have no idea. I can only think of like a narrow margin of error, like where they have to, I don't know.
Like a close election poll or something. It's like a narrow margin.
Not sure. Maybe it's all in reference to when that woman gets beheaded at the end.
Yeah.
Although I did like that final line that he gives her, where he's like, says something about like
you're tall.
Bam.
Which is such like a great like hack screenwriter one-liner that I don't know when that came into the process of the film, but that was definitely thrown in.
Yeah.
At some extraordinarily late point in the production. So maybe what it is it's narrow margin in terms of elections. So really maybe this is set in the Welcome to Mooseport extended universe.
Welcome.
I haven't seen Welcome to Mooseport. I just know that it's about like
I saw it. It's not good. But
about a president running for mayor or something.
Yeah. All right. That's Narrow Margin.
Narrow Mooseport.
Gregory Harrison has a tough job.
I'm a fireman. I smell like smoke occasionally.
But his toughest job is raising his kids.
There's 4 of them, right?
Being both father and mother takes practice. Catch a sneak preview of the man who keeps his family from going up in smoke.
Fire's kind of a theme.
The Family Man. Sneak preview Tuesday after Rescue 911.
Boy, that is a real time capsule of an ad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've never heard it. I guess is that like a show that ran for 13 episodes or something?
I think it ran for a very short amount of time. I can't remember.
It seemed so much like a parody, but like one of those like I don't know, like Too Many Cooks or something. I was expecting to get really surreally disturbing or something.
So if you follow us on Twitter, I tweet out new TV listings every single day for whatever day it is, and every time I go to 1990 and look, the sitcoms that were around in 1990 were just incredible. Like there was an Uncle Buck sitcom that came out in 1990. There were just so many bad sitcoms that didn't last at all in 1990.
Okay, so I can update you on the Family Man. It was not 13 episodes, it was 22. It got the back 9, except it was canceled before episode 22 aired. So I love that. I love they were burning off the rest because they canceled it. They burned it off in the summer, but apparently even that was so terrible they couldn't even bother to air the last one. So it just says episode 22, unaired.
They did that. They do that a lot with cartoons too, because like when I do research for the Saturday morning cartoons post that I do, I'll find that they'll be like, oh yeah, they created 96 episodes of this show, but they only aired like 40. And I'm just like, wow.
I like when they put a show on TV and then they like the network does on network and they move it to Fridays because Fridays the space where you want to kill off a show, and then it does really well on Fridays and they have to keep it there.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I think that the remake of Hawaii Five-0, which is now run about as long as the original Hawaii Five-0 did, CBS moved it to Fridays to try and kill it off, and that was 6 years ago. Anyway.
Speaking of TV.
Yes. Mafia stories may have a larger presence in film, but television has seen several mob-themed shows over the years. While The Sopranos may be the most prolific of the bunch, this month we're going to be talking about a show that began in 1987 and completed its 4-season run in 1990.
Wiseguy was created by Stephen J. Cannell and Frank Lupo and ran on CBS from September 16th, 1987 to December 8th, 1990, airing a total of 75 episodes, and today we'll be discussing the feature-length pilot.
The series starred Ken Wall as Vinny Terranova, an undercover agent of the Organized Crime Bureau, a fictional division of the FBI.
You don't say.
Okay. So, speaking of TV movies, this is a mess.
Oh yeah. Big time. So
clear out the next hour. This is all we're talking about for the next hour.
The show starts with him getting out with Ken Wall, who I don't know if I've ever seen him. I got to look him up because I totally don't remember this guy from.
I read a truly incredible Ken Wall's Wikipedia page is truly remarkable because they have a thing there where it says very little is known about his life because like not even his birthday is known for sure because every time they ask his birthday, he's retired now, but every time they asked his birthday when he was working, like how old he was, he would give them a different answer. Yeah, there's a reason for that, Wall states cryptically, but I'm not going to get into why.
What the hell? What does that mean?
This is also not his name. That is not his actual name. He says that he chose the name because it was the name of the soldier who saved his father's life during the Korean War, which is the only personal detail about Ken Wall that I could find.
Wow.
I can't believe that answer though. When they asked why he gives a different birthday every time they ask, and he said, "There's a reason, but I'm not going to get into why." What does that mean?
I don't know, man. There's a lot to unpack with that.
Yeah.
I think it's a mystery. We need to sit down and figure this mystery out, the Ken Wall mystery.
Or we could just talk about Wiseguy.
Yeah, that's probably better. Ken Wall was on Double Dare for 6 episodes, so there you go. Double Dare.
All right. So now, the show, this program, this pilot. What happened in it?
I don't know. What I'm wondering is, did it get better? Because it was on for 75 episodes over 4 seasons.
It had to get better, or at least have someone watching it.
It's really weird that it's so bad. I mean,
how do you do this episodically? How do you have a new Wiseguy every week?
So I've read that the way that it was structured, and to be clear, we only watched the pilot, which was an hour and a half long. Sometimes when we do TV shows on this show, I'll watch more. Like I'll try to just cram in as many as I can, like 15. Like I watched almost the whole series, but like I just couldn't do. I
messaged you last night and I said, the pilot for Wiseguy is 93 minutes. Do you want to watch episode 2 as well? And you said no, but I want you to know, if you had said yes, I would have refused.
Yeah. So
I tried to be agreeable, but if you had said watch episode 2, I would have said that's not happening.
I'm sorry, I cannot oblige you on this.
Yeah, nope.
From what I understand, the structure was much like a soap opera where there would be like like a 10 or an arc of like several episodes, and like so there'd be like 6 or 10 episodes that would be, I guess, one case or situation or wise guy that they'd be dealing with, and that's it.
I wish it was actually like straight up episodic. Then it could have been the wise guy of the week.
Every week they profile, like he goes after a different wise guy.
I mean, 10 episode arcs, those are like the shorter TV seasons they have now. So basically, this could have been peak TV now.
Oh my God.
Streaming on Netflix. Wise guy.
Okay, so his boss, he gets out, the show starts with him getting out of prison. So he's already in this like special bureau from straight out of the gate. And he spends 18 months, I guess, in prison for something. I don't know what. And I guess that gives him like the backstory that helps him.
I feel like there's maybe I was missing something. There was a snippet of dialogue where they just said 18, and for a second I thought they meant years.
That's what I thought at first too. They do just say 18, and I'm like, 18 years? Oh my God! And then I'm like, wait a minute, this guy looks like he's in his late 20s probably. There's no way.
18 years for what you did. The rest because you tried to.
So then he starts. I mean, talk about. So you go into this like academy or whatever for training, and then they're like, okay, you've completed your training, and it's probably 6 months, maybe. It's probably a pretty extensive training. And he gets out, and they're like, okay, now you got to go to jail for 18 months. Like what a dick move that is. Before you can even start this new position as this undercover wise guy, you have to go to prison for 18 months. So he gets out. His boss tells him that he's retiring. And then of course the next scene he gets shot by one of the crime guys.
As one does.
Yeah, of course. And he goes to see him in the hospital, and he's like, I'm going to get these guys. And then his boss wakes up immediately and then dies just as quickly. And it was just the funniest scene where he's laying there, he's like, I'm going to get these guys. And then the boss wakes up, opens his eyes, and he looks fine, and then just instant death. It was just like, what?
Like, was there a conversation that they cut out for time reasons?
It was really weird how that happened. And the thing I noticed, for being a TV show, things seem to move ridiculously fast. Like he meets this crime boss, and the way he does it is he gets a job as a waiter in a restaurant that the crime boss frequents. And to get in with him, he throws water on him, then insults him, then challenges him to a fight, then he fights him, and then all of a sudden the crime boss gives him a penthouse and a Porsche, and he's in, and that's it. And it's like, what? There's not like, it's all summed up in one conversation when they're walking into the penthouse, and he's like, I had my guys look you up. You went through some stuff, and that's pretty much it. You want a job? Here's a Porsche.
Was this written with an outline, or were they just going right into the script?
I have no idea. It is a mess.
Because this does not feel like something that was plotted out before, and this feels like they were just going scene to scene, and they were like, I guess he's here now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they were like, okay, well, we need to have a lot of characters. We need to have action. So there's like these action scenes, these shootouts that randomly occur that feel out of place and nonsensical. And then there's like, these cops that are hassling them. There's 2 scenes that play out almost the exact same way, where they get pulled over and the cops knock out a taillight, and they're like, hey, you got a taillight out. And that, of course, causes problems. And then at one point, he gets arrested, and the guy, I think it was the cop, goes, Vince, is that a Caucasian name? And I'm just like, what? Is that a Caucasian name? What is he talking about? What is this? What am I watching? The dialogue in this show
is truly spectacular.
It is completely incomprehensible. Like, what is going on here?
And this, nothing makes sense in the big world of crime here.
Oh my god. Yeah. So Wiseguy was not a good time for me at all. It's funny.
The dialogue is very fun.
We were just talking about like how Narrow Margin in a lot of ways felt like a TV movie, but it wasn't boring. This felt like a TV movie and it was extremely boring.
Except for when, as we said with Narrow Margin and TV movies in general, when they do something that makes no sense at all, and in the case of this pilot, no sense at all is in reference to every word that comes out of everyone's mouth at any time.
I mean, it's funny. Like,
I mean, it is funny.
A lot of the stuff that happens is hilarious. I mean, they also set up a love interest in this episode, of course, where it turns out to be the daughter of the mob boss? I can't even. I literally watched this like several hours ago, and I already forgot most of the story beats.
I guess it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. On the Wikipedia, if you're curious, they do have a list of all of the story arcs and the cast of all of the various arcs. And Kevin Spacey was involved in one of the story arcs. So you have that.
Isn't that a thing?
You have that going for you. Looks like Jerry Lewis was in it as well for an arc. And at one point, Ken Wall left the show, and they replaced him with someone else. Season 4. So Ken Wall left after season 3 over a dispute with CBS over the direction of the show.
Not enough wise guys.
We need more wise guys in the show. It's called Wiseguy. We need more.
Put an S. It's wise guys now.
The wise guy quotient is far too low.
Yeah.
We got plenty of guys, but we need them to be wise.
Yeah. Actually, the guys aren't wise enough.
I struggled to find an ad. I was looking for like an ad for the show, and I found one, but it was like for a much later season, and it wasn't a very good ad. Like it wasn't very like podcast friendly as far as the dialogue and the audio, but I'm sure that the promos for this were just so bad. Stephen Bauer was brought in to replace Ken Wall, and he was the new lead, and he plays a former United States attorney named Michael Santana, who had recently been disbarred. There you go. New theme song was created for the 4th season too by Mike Post.
Was it the law that all crime shows in the 80s and 90s had to have music by Mike Post?
Probably, yeah.
Because I saw music by Mike Post in the opening credits for this, and I was like, of course, who else would it be?
A lot of saxophone. Tons of saxophone in this, especially when any women would be on screen. They would just load up the sax music anytime a female character would be on screen, which was not too often, I guess. But
yeah, it really wasn't that often.
I'm glad we dove into this show and not something like The Sopranos, because The Sopranos has been, I mean, what a
again,
great...
that would be another thing. Like, it would be like talking about Goodfellas again. What on earth could we say about it?
Yeah, I mean, like, Sopranos is just such an iconic show, and like, I would watching that for just a couple episodes, I feel like wouldn't do it much justice. So I would have to rewatch the whole series, because it's been like many years since I've seen it, and go watch The Sopranos instead of Wiseguy would be my recommendation.
Go watch almost anything else besides.
Go watch literally any other TV show. Mm-hmm. But if you do want to see Wiseguy, it's on Tubi. Is that where?
I guess that's how you say it.
Tubi. That's where we watched it.
Yep.
I think the whole season.
It's the new Crackle.
Yeah. The whole series is on Tubi. You can watch it for free with ads. And the ads came at really awkward moments, like in the middle of sentences.
I had heard other people say that about Tubi, and they were like, "No, you don't understand." And I was like, "The ads are really weird," and I kept thinking, "That can't be that weird."
It's like on YouTube when people monetize their videos, but they don't specify where they want the ads, and they just let it autofill. So it'll happen just at random times in the middle of a conversation, which is very awkward.
Tubi might be like Crackle, but it's not as good as Crackle because it doesn't tell you why it crackles.
I know. I am very curious to know why Wiseguy crackles. I want to know.
Can you imagine having to write the why it crackles for Wiseguy?
That would be a struggle.
That's definitely not a position. That's like, who writes why it crackles? Is that just a thing from the PR? Do they just extract a line from like the synopsis, or is there some likely unpaid intern that has to say why it crackles?
I would say probably that. Yes, probably the latter. Yeah.
Like, imagine being the unpaid intern. Your labor is already being exploited, and you have to say why Wiseguy crackles.
Oh my God, that's Wiseguy. Go check it out on Tubi.
Next up is another film released on September 21st. Written and directed by the Coen brothers and starring Gabriel Byrne, Marcia Gay Harden, and John Turturro, this is Miller's Crossing.
From the makers of Blood Simple and Raising Arizona, a world where nothing is what it seems to be. Leo, is he still the boss?
The day I back down from a fight, Casper's welcome to the rackets, this town, and my place at the table.
Casper, can he muscle in?
I'm sick of taking a strap from you, Leo. And I'm sick of the high hat.
Tom, would he sell out a friend?
You shouldn't be confronting Jenny, Casper. That's what I've been trying to tell you.
I can still trade body blows with any man in this town. Except you, Tom.
And Verna.
Verna, is she Leo's girl?
What is it to Leo?
I told him you were a tramp and he should dump you.
The Dane, has he got it figured?
You dumping Leo for the guy who put a bullet in your brother?
Bernie, will he turn the tables?
Don't smart me. I want to watch you squirm. I want to see you sweat a little.
No one is what they seem to be.
Up is down. Black is white.
At Miller's Crossing.
I like how they set up that last line of the trailer. I was so excited for that to come out. At Miller's Crossing.
All right, let's just, okay, let me just do this. So in 1929, a political boss and his advisor have a parting of the ways when they both fall for the same woman.
Okay, so we get these plot synopses from like IMDb or Letterboxd, whatever, and sometimes you get one that feels like it was by someone who just kind of watched the movie.
Yeah.
That's one of them.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
Like someone who watched the movie 6 months ago and they were like, tell me what this is about in one sentence.
One thing I'll say about Miller's Crossing. I very much like Miller's Crossing.
Oh yeah, I love this movie too. This might be my favorite out of all the movies we've talked about this month, actually.
I think it's an underrated entry in the Coen's filmography. I think a lot of people people just tend to forget about this movie. You know, because it's one of their earlier films. And
yeah, it's like the one. I feel like when there's a major movie, you forget the one that came right before it, or like right around it. This is like the one that was right before Barton Fink. They wrote, as the story goes, they wrote Barton Fink as like a breather, like taking a break, like because they're having a lot of trouble with writing the script for this movie, and they just took a break and wrote Barton Fink, as one does.
Yeah, and this came right after Raising Arizona, too. So, I mean, it's kind of sandwiched in between two of their classic entries.
I always lose my... I'm sorry, we'll get back. I always lose my mind when is just described as like making a really important work as like a break, as like a breather exercise while making something else more stressful. Because that's not what a break is.
No,
a break is not doing anything. It's like Wong Kar-wai making Chungking Express because he was like bored about the post-production process on another movie, or stressing him out, and he was like, I need to take a breather. I'm gonna make another movie, and then it's a good movie too.
The Coens, they're just so much talent here. So I really love Miller's Crossing. This is every time I see this movie, I love it. And The weird thing about it though is I feel like this is like mismarketed. Like when you see that trailer, you're just like, oh boy. Like I just feel like the trailer's so bad and it's so boring, and like the honestly, I don't think, I mean, the poster's okay. Some of the posters are okay, but for the most part, they seem pretty bland. And maybe this is a hot take, but I really don't like the score of this movie. I find it to be, it just doesn't match the movie itself. And I feel like when I hear the score for Miller's Crossing, and you heard a little bit there in the trailer, it feels like this movie should take place on the prairie. Like it should be taking place in like rolling hills, and it doesn't. This is a gangster movie.
Like a very score, very much inspired by the one scene that has Danny Boy playing in it.
Yeah, this is a gangster movie. This is a movie that is filled with violence and has its fair share of action in it. And I feel like a lot of that gets muddled in the marketing for this movie. But that being said, I think that almost everything about this is exceptional. From,
oh yeah,
I mean the writing alone, this dialogue, just chef's kiss.
This is some like top tier Coen brothers dialogue.
It's just so good. I mean, the dialogue in this movie is just so juicy. You can just, I mean, you're just hanging on every word that these characters are saying. It's just so exquisite.
I just want to give a good word about basically every performance on screen in this movie.
You have a who's who of Coen Brothers, mainstays, even in small roles. Like you have Steve Buscemi in there as Mink, and you have Gabriel Byrne as Tom, and you have Marcia Gay Harden, John Turturro, John Polito in there. Oh, he is so good as Johnny Casper in this. Albert Finney, of course, as Leo. Just a great, great cast. Holy crap. Just what a phenomenal movie all around. Just, man, I love revisiting this movie. It's a little lengthy. It's not quite 2 hours.
A touch at the...
It's not quite 2 hours, but it feels longer to me. Like it feels...
Almost in a... I felt that too, but I almost felt it in like a way that I didn't mind.
I don't
like it was
right. Yeah. I don't mind it. I mean, especially because it's fun. It's just a good time to see Gabriel Byrne like wheeling and dealing and double crossing and triple crossing, and it just seeing how his plan, or trying to figure out how this plan of his is unfolding, because you're never quite sure, right? You don't really know if he's doing this on purpose or if it's just these are happy accidents and he's just looking at the path of least resistance.
And it is so fascinating just to watch the directions that everything goes. Yeah, because it is, as far as, complexly plotted movies go, you want one that just feels like organically complex. And this is one of them.
Yeah. I think it feels a lot more, I don't want to say mainstream, but I would say maybe a little more conventional than a lot of the Coen Brothers movies. However, they do have fun with some of the camera work, and there's some kind of odd moments in there too. Like the one scene where they bring that guy in that they beat up, that was, I guess he was like he knew about the fix, and they beat him up, and he told them that Gabriel Byrne's character approached him about it, and he just starts randomly yelling in there. Like he just starts screaming for some reason.
Yes.
I love that scene. I love the chair scene when he's getting interrogated and he picks up the chair and hits the guy. And the guy's just like, come on, Tom. And he leaves. Really, there's just some really memorable moments in this movie. Man, so good. We had Ryan watch this one time for Ryan Watches a Movie, and I can't remember why, but he did not like it.
Oh.
He gave it a 6 out of 10. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. This was back in 2012. We gave it to him. So you can hear Ryan's thoughts from Ryan watches movie on Miller's
the,
Crossing.
The early era of the
Yeah, that was the first year.
Pulse podcast empire.
That was year one.
Mm-hmm.
He said his tagline was, or his synopsis was, "It's basically like a twisting movie," which I guess is true. Yeah, there's some twists in there.
Miller's Crossing. It is a twisting movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what I love about it.
Same here, man. I love the twists and turns that this movie it takes. You don't really see where it's going. You don't really know how Tom's going to get himself out of this situation, especially when, Leo strangely just dumps him like a bag of bricks. Like, they seem like they're basically father and son, and then he just completely writes him off and it beats the crap out of him. Oh man, that just reminded me of the scene when they try to kill Leo and burn his house down, and just that whole sequence. Oh my God. What a badass. You see Albert Finney climbing out of his second floor
such a great
window. He's like a Albert Finney spider climbing off his roof and just walking right in the middle of the road with his Tommy gun, just blasting that car.
Out of the many incredible moments of Albert Finney's career, that deserves a special place.
I mean, where does Miller's Crossing land on your Coen Brothers list?
I don't know exactly where, but it's pretty high up there.
Yeah, it's probably certainly in the upper echelon for me of Coen Brothers stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Fargo is probably still my number one. Because I really love Fargo. That was like a gateway movie for me. Got me into.
I feel like I have seen. It's been a while since I've seen some of like the big Coen Brothers movies. So I need to go back, and I keep meaning to rewatch Barton Fink.
Yeah,
because I saw it a few years ago, but I've forgotten a lot of it.
Our final movie this month plays like a modern day Robin Hood story, except in this case, Robin Hood is a former drug lord played by Christopher Walken. Released on September 28th and directed by the always controversial Abel Ferrara, this is King of New York.
Tell me you never came to see me. I wanted to see you in a cage, man.
He served his time.
What can we expect from the reformed Frank White?
I want to be mayor.
But some things don't change.
From here on, nothing goes down unless I'm involved.
King of New York.
Expected to get away with killing all these people?
I never killed anybody that didn't deserve.
Starts Friday in Famous Players and other theaters. Check newspapers for showtimes.
Check newspapers for showtimes. Great sentence.
Good old days.
Yeah. A drug kingpin is released from prison and seeks to take total control of the criminal underworld in order to give back to the community. So I actually did watch this for the first time, I think a few weeks ago. When I checked on Letterboxd, I was surprised that it was more like a month ago, but it doesn't feel like it. I feel like I still remember it pretty clearly.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, and I looked, and it was like 7 years ago.
I kind of had a version of that happen to me with Goodfellas, because I thought, I feel like I can kind of remember most of that, because I feel like I saw it earlier this year, and then I checked Letterboxd, and I last watched it last winter.
Yeah, it was
like
so
18 months ago.
It was so funny because you were like, "Oh, I just saw King of New York not too long ago," and I was like, "Yeah, so did I." And then I looked it up, and I'm like, "In 2013." Well, but it's funny though, because I was gonna have to rewatch it anyway, because I realized that I forgot like most of the movie, and rewatching it now. Now, I guess my first question to you is, what's your familiarity with Abel Ferrara? Are you a fan of his work?
I'm not terribly familiar with Abel Ferrara. The one thing I did know going in, thing that was confirmed by this movie, is that the great thing about Abel Ferrara movie is that the lighting of every shot, or like every establishing shot, just every shot in general that isn't like a close-up of someone's face, and including close-up of someone's face. Basically, every shot of an Abel Ferrara movie looks like something that came out of a nightmare I had once.
Yeah.
And I love that.
He loves those like gel lights. I think that's what they use, where everything in this movie is like blue, like tinted very vivid colors.
Mm. Like it feels like either a nightmare or a very vague memory of probably an unpleasant moment of the past.
Yeah, I mean, Abel Ferrara is really good and draws his expertise from portraying the seedy underbelly of New York. I mean, that's like
I think you said before that you liked early 90s like crime wave era New York movies, and I do too. We need to keep watching them.
Absolutely. 80s, 70s, 80s, and then early 90s. All those movies that are like really gritty, grimy New York movies. I love them.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, of course, the really great ones in the 70s and 80s, but in terms of this podcast, like the early 90s have a lot.
Oh, sure. Yeah. For me, Abel Ferrara is a little hit or miss. Like, I can appreciate a lot of his movies, like Ms. 45. I actually like that one. Driller Killer, not so much, but those movies are really excellent New York crime movies. And his later movies, again, little hit or miss for me, like 444 Last Day on Earth, the one with Willem Dafoe. Man, did I hate that movie. I despised that movie so much. But
have you seen the Pasolini movie?
I have not.
I haven't either. I guess I was just asking if you did. That just came out recently, didn't it? I know it was like on the festival circuit 4 or 5 years ago, though.
Yeah, I mean, on IMDb it says 2014 for that one. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what happened with that. His movies are always really divisive, and I think he has a hard time releasing his movies. Like Welcome to New York, I think, was another one that took forever to come out, and I liked Welcome to New York. That was the one, the Gerard Depardieu one.
Anyway, to this movie, I liked this movie quite a bit. I liked, I mentioned the appearance of it. I also thought it was some very good work from Christopher Walken as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, talking about like peak times in actors' careers, this is certainly I think an iconic role for Christopher Walken. I think this is definitely one of the roles for him that sort of created that persona that he developed. And I think that this was probably one of Abel Ferrara's most accessible and mainstream movies. But, and I liked it too, but watching it or rewatching it for this show, there's not a lot going on in this movie.
I don't know. I'm not just such a sucker for movies that capture a specific mood and then just go 1,000% in on it and never relent on what it's been able to establish in terms of mood, that I feel like that alone was a lot of what drew me into it. And I feel like for a conventional story, it does tell it pretty well. It tells it in a way that meets, like, it's not playing too into its conventionality, but at the same time, it does deliver on it in a solid way that makes it feel like at least the movie believes in its own story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. I think even though this might be Ferrara's most accessible or mainstream movie, I think that it still has that layer of excess and that layer of sort of outlandishness that he tends to put in his movies. Like, I think a good example in this movie would be the scene with Lawrence Fishburne when he goes and orders the food, and just how that inexplicably escalates.
Incredible levels of chaos that just materialize out of nowhere.
I mean, I feel like that scene just reinforces the fact that Abel Ferrara has no desire to create realistic characters at all. He's just looking for everything to be so over the top and grandiose. And I really, that's my favorite. That's my favorite scene.
Just completely perplexed that anyone is reacting like anything was happening.
It's just everything about that scene, from the moment he walks into that food place, that like fast food place, just, oh my God, it's so amazing. The way that he orders the food and just, he goes in to it pissed off. Like, he's already mad when he walks in, and he just progressively loses it more and more.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time has this complete air of like completely just not surprised, but like just angry, not angry, but not surprised.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
Usually within an episode, we'll have a theme, and then it tends to always be like the last movie that is like the loosest interpretation of the theme. And this movie's not. I think that this one is a little bit more of the outlier in that it's not specifically a mafia movie, but it feels like one. It's just not, it's not directly tied to the mafia, and more like Walken he's his own guy. Like he is the mafia.
And there's just that incredible energy to it that it feels like that Walken is just perfect for.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great dialogue for him to just chew through in this movie too, where it's a little out there and it's really clever, and it allows him to have a few really solid monologues, and it just gives him time to just chew up the scenery. And again, Lawrence Fishburne, just it's a role that you don't think of Lawrence Fishburne in anymore, but man, he just Jimmy Jump.
Yep.
Jimmy Jump. He crushed it. He had David Caruso in there too, as one of the cops, and Wesley Snipes in an early role for him as well as another one of the cops, and Steve Buscemi was in there as well as his name is Test Tube.
What a great credit to be able to put down.
Yeah. I think that's going to do it for this month. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, you can send us an email to 90s@filmpulse.net with your favorite 90s memories and suggestions for what we should cover next. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at 90spod for daily 90s fun. If you have a moment, consider leaving us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice, as that would help us out tremendously. Next month, we'll be back with a special Halloween episode, but until then...
It will be very special.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
There's a lot going on right now.
I mentioned it on the weekly show as well, so this might be the most ambitious podcast that we've done.
And it makes me nervous.
Kevin's also really nervous about it.
Oh, yeah.
For Ken Bakley, my name's Adam Patterson, and this has been Saved by the 90s.
Bye, everyone.